If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resiliency looks like from different people's perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but often neglect the spiritual pillar. This looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resiliency looks like in the lives of our guests, who are from different walks of life. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into a drafted plan. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. This episode's guest is Craig Legates. Craig is a lieutenant with the Dorchester County Sheriff's Office. He has been with them for the last 14 years. He's been in law enforcement for the last 28 years total. Craig, welcome.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here.
It is awesome to have you. This is actually the first time that I'm recording in studio with people actually here live, so it's a little bit different because I'm actually able to carry on a conversation face to face with someone, but I am really, really excited to have you here tonight. So how about this, Craig? Let's start out really, really easy. I'm going to throw you 5 questions. Super, super easy. Number 1, what is one thing that you find repulsive?
That could be a list, but one thing, even to this day, in all the stuff that I've been through and seen, is I still to this day cannot deal with smells. Bad. I deal with pretty much bodies most of the time in my job anyway. And the bad smells and that kind of stuff, I can look at it, I can play with it, I can do whatever. It doesn't bother me, but the smells to this day still get me.
Wow.
I've gotten much more used to it at one point in my career because I was dealing with it all the time. But yeah, I've just never been able to. But that's what they make putrefaction masks for.
Oh, boy. Wow. All right. Well, that went dark really quickly.
That one's always quick, yeah.
Okay, what is in your online cart currently that you have not bought?
I have no idea. My wife is the Amazon person, and I don't know what she had. I know she had some lights. We were trying to redo some stuff in the house, so she had some lighting fixtures she had in there. But at one point, we have our first grandbaby on the way. So at one point, I had to change the password to the Amazon. So she's got that back. So no, I'm kidding. But
you're just keeping a close eye on it?
It doesn't matter. So, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I think there was some light fixtures in there.
All right. So then, what is one thing that you absolutely love about your job?
That's changed over the years. I think at this point, it's honestly teaching and mentoring the ones coming up, especially in those coming into the leadership roles. My role's mostly management at this point, and I really enjoy taking the time and watching them come up and actually coaching and getting them up to speed. My theory is that my job is to teach them how to do my job. So I actually really enjoy that at this point.
So how much longer do you have with Dorchester, South Carolina? How long you got?
I can retire at any time. We can retire at 25. I'm currently in graduate school, which I think we'll talk about probably a little bit later. Graduate school, I'm taking a career turn again. Yeah, glutton for punishment. So once I finish that, I'm either going to stay 6 months or a year and 6 months. It depends on some business stuff.
All right. Well, speaking of career change, what would you leave your current job for today?
Like I said, back in grad school, I'm actually doing a master in clinical mental health counseling. So when I'm done that, graduate in May, and should, if I pass the test, be licensed. So I will actually kind of branch out from that and do hit the therapist side of things. So I'd still like to be somewhat involved, especially with the personnel in law enforcement. But yeah.
Okay, so then now you are a superhero to a lot of people, especially Stanley, my son. He absolutely loves hanging out with Craig whenever he drives up to church in his cop car. In fact, tonight, whenever Craig and his wife rolled up, the first thing that Stanley said was, "Aw, you didn't bring the cop car." Yeah, well, it happens. But who is your favorite superhero?
That's a hard one because I don't. Like I said, I've been in grad school, so I haven't actually seen a movie or anything lately. I always say my favorite superhero is, and it's not really a superhero, but it's Mighty Mouse. He's the coolest cat ever.
I beg to differ. I think he is actually a superhero.
So he's Mighty Mouse is my guy.
He can be a superhero. Yeah. Let's go with it. All right, Mighty Mouse. There's your superhero. We got him now. All right, so let's go ahead and start transitioning into what this is. So you've been on the force for 28 years. Can you kind of walk us through your background, where you've come from, just who Craig Legates is as a person through the job up to today?
Yeah, sure. It was like I said, I've been on 28 years. I'll go back a little bit further. So when I was in high school, my goal in life was to be in the military. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I wanted to do a total career in the military. So got out of high school, did the ASVAB, did well on it. And so I went shopping around because, I wanted to find out what the military was going to do for me because I was so important, which we all know now is not the brightest way to handle that. Anyway, so finally decided which branch. I was going in the Army and got up to MEPS, went up through the entire process. Everything was good. I was in pretty good shape at the time. Everything was good to go until I ended up at the final doctor, and this was a long time ago, so he had a book on his desk, and he informed me at that point that he could not sign off on me being in the military because I had a birth defect. And the birth defect I had, less than 1% of the people that have it can walk. So as I stood in front of him and argued with him that I could in fact walk, but the book said I couldn't. So yeah, I was born with spina bifida, but really no side effects from it whatsoever. I've got very, very, very lucky. There's been, so that was the early on. So now I'm stuck because I have no idea. My military thing was gone. So I'd always thought about law enforcement in the future. I thought about some sort of law enforcement type stuff within the military. So it's kind of a natural thing. I wasn't old enough to join the police department yet or law enforcement. So I went to and started school and went to college, got a 2-year degree while I was waiting to turn 21. Did all that. Ended up, so my search started when, just before I was 21, and it was 2.5 years I tried to get home with get into law enforcement. Back then there was waiting list to even talk to anybody. It's not like it is now where they're, kind of begging for people. Back then it was, and there was a lot of, I guess one of the only side effects from the spina bifida is my height, what I call vertically challenged. And that was a big deal back then. There were some departments that I couldn't even apply to because I didn't meet the height requirements. So it took me a long, long time. I ended up going to work for one of the local hospitals in their security department, just trying to stay in the mix. I was also a volunteer firefighter and EMT, went through EMT school at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
I was keeping myself busy, looking, and honestly, I had given up on law enforcement literally and had gone. My best friend who I lived with was, he was a captain with one of the local fire departments at that point. Took me over and I met with one of the chiefs, and they were going to hire me. And literally when I got home that day, there was a phone call from City of Orangeburg Public Safety and their fire and police. So that started that process, and, they took a chance and brought me on. I had the fire and EMS background, so that's really where they was my advantage. So got on there, stayed there about a year and a half, and then I came home to Somerville. Was talking about getting married and having kids, and just wanted to be back home. So came back, went to work for Somerville Police Department, stayed there for many years. Spent I don't want to say most of my career. I guess I've been at the county longer, but a long time with Somerville. Progressed through the ranks there, got married, had a child. Progressed through the ranks there, started as a patrolman, made detective in 97. So I've been in the investigative side of things for most of my career. Came out when I made lieutenant to run a shift. That was probably my favorite time in law enforcement. And then they brought me about a year. I was only out about a year, and they brought me back in to run the detective division. So I had, the detectives, crime scene, narcotics, warrants, victims advocates, school resource, SWAT. We weren't allowed to call it SWAT. It was ESU. So, yeah, I kept pretty busy.
What was ESU?
Emergency Services Unit.
Oh, okay.
The mayor at the time refused to allow us to call it SWAT. So we called it ESU.
Now, was because of negative connotation assigned to it? Okay.
Yeah. The mayor was such a good guy, but he was old school. So New York NYPD has ESU instead of SWAT, so that's where we got that from. So,
okay.
So
okay.
It got us through the mix. So stayed there. I just things in my life, and we'll kind of talk about that later. Things weren't good with me, and I didn't understand it, and I finally ended up getting out for a little while. I was going to go make money. So I got out, went to work at a local company, actually a national company. Made some pretty good money, but I just didn't. I didn't care about the almighty dollar. And, when corporate stuff got in the way of actually working, and I'm like, I can go back. If I want to deal with politics, I can go back to work. So came back, got back in. I actually worked for the public defender's office for a while as an investigator here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I went to the dark side for a little while, but the chief public defender he's a good man here. And that's one of the reasons because I was very happy to work for him. So I was the investigator. I basically had the entire circuit, which was First Circuit, which is Dorchester, Orangeburg, and Calhoun counties. So I was the only investigator in those three counties, and it was good. It was a little bit slow paced, so I was getting the itch, and then the current sheriff, he won office, and one of my friends from high school was actually running the detective division at the time. I always say he's a car salesman, and he tried to get me to come over there for probably almost a year, and I refused because it was a new administration. There was all kinds of, there's always, when a new administration comes in, there's always changes, and I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with all that. So he eventually conned me into coming over there. So I went straight into the detective division over there. Worked. So I worked cases for several years over there. I We worked pretty much whatever, but they tended to the major cases and a lot of the political cases, that kind of thing. But we worked a little bit of everything. We all kind of split it up. So I actually left there. I stayed on as a reserve deputy and took over, and I was the director of risk management and safety for the county. So, which sounded cool because it paid a lot more. And then got over there, and we were right back into the almighty dollar again. So, and it was a good job. It really was.
But was it satisfying?
But it was not at all satisfying. It was just, it was a job, and it was, my heart wasn't in it, and that's not fair to them. And it wasn't doing me any good. And I was, I mentioned stuff in my life was not great. Things had really taken a turn for the better. I still didn't understand a lot of the stuff that was going on, but I was correcting some of the behaviors and all. And honestly, we'll talk about a lot of that stuff later, so I don't want to double up on it. But we, so anyway, stayed there about a year and a half. Ended up going right back. The sheriff needed a lieutenant to run their crime scene unit, and so I went back. So I've been back there since 2014, I think. So I've been in criminal investigation division since then, and running the crime scene unit. So, and that's where we're at. I've got a couple of peripheral duties now. We have an embedded mental health clinician now within the department, so I supervise. They say supervisor. I'm really the liaison for that, because we're really trying to get mental health issues addressed within the sheriff's office.
So speaking of that, you're a liaison between the county of Dorchester here in South Carolina and the mental health?
Yeah, we have the South Carolina Department of Mental Health actually has embedded a clinician inside the sheriff's office, and they have it almost all the bigger departments now have them here. And it's a good program. Depending on which grant they're using, a lot of them have to deal with victims, just victims only. Our grant, we're lucky, they can kind of do whatever we need them to do. The only thing they can't do is be a therapist for the deputies. They can, in fact, and part of their job is to build a rapport with the deputies, so that they come up there and they're able to sit down and talk with them, and then we can get them referred to somebody
So they come
outside.
in, have a conversation, they identify that there's a need.
Yep, and then we can get them going with it. And a lot of times, sitting down and talking to somebody for 10 minutes is pretty much, being able to process this stuff out. That's what it is.
Well, and that's a huge step. Like, even with the military, we've started to do that in the Air Force, where we put what's called an MFLAC, basically mental health individual, into different units that see higher amounts of action. So we've been doing it for a few years, and I know that was a catch up from where we were before. So I can just imagine in the cop world, how relieving that can also be, but also how standoffish people could be to it.
It is, and we're honestly still lacking behind the military. There's such a huge stigma that I'm fighting every day, because my attitude has completely changed, because I was on that other side, just suck it up and deal with it thing, because that's what I did, and we see how that turned out. So dealing with that stigma and trying to change that stigma, that's huge now. So I'm a big advocate, and I openly talk about mental health stuff and trying to normalize it. It's okay. So working on that, and that's we working on trying to have some critical incident debriefings, stress debriefings, and stuff like that. We actually had to have one last week. We had a pretty awful incident that, but we were able to get it together, and we had some show up, and so it was good. So it's at least being talked about, but there's such a huge stigma of, I'm going to lose my job. They're not going to let me carry a gun. And just because you're having a problem does not mean you can't function, right?
With the paramilitary world and the military world, that's the huge thing, right? Like, you're going to take away what my job actually is, which is a part of who I am as an individual. Yeah,
and in law enforcement, that's big. Just like I'm sure the military, it's depending on who you are, it's a lot of it is that's. You are that, right? It's not just a job. So
now in leading this change, it sounds like you've kind of had a big part of leading that change. What is your style of leadership? Like, how would you describe it, and how has it transitioned over the years?
Yeah. It has transitioned. I kind of got trial by fire as far as the leadership aspect. I was a Somerville. I made detective. And I got my PFC stripe the same day, because law enforcement, you start with nothing and then you build your way up, right? So got my PFC stripe promotion the same day as I made detective, and then I made corporal, worked in there several years, made corporal. They left me inside the unit, inside of the detective unit, which was kind of unusual, but it was a good thing for me. But I didn't have any supervisory responsibilities. Yes, I was a corporal, but I didn't supervise it. We had sergeants and lieutenants for that. I didn't, so I was just working cases, getting paid a little bit more. And I do mean a little bit more. So super quick, interesting story with that. What it leads into it is they had a sergeant's position came open. They were very rare. It just didn't happen a lot. Sergeants actually were the shift commanders back then for the department. And so the position came up. I went and asked the chief if I could go through the testing process. It was a 2-day process. And I asked him if I could go through it just for practice. And he hemmed and hawed, and I got it. And he was like, no, you're not eligible. I just didn't have enough time in rank. And I was like, I completely understand. I'll even sign a piece of paper. I totally understand. I just want to go through it. That way, when my time comes, I have an idea what we're dealing with. So he let me do it. And that particular testing process, I got called in Friday by the chief, and he's like, well, good news and bad news. Good news is you scored number 1. Bad news is I can't promote you. I'm like, he goes, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you don't need to apologize. I knew that coming in, good. Now I know what to expect. So I'm going to do better next time. And he goes, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave you on the list for 6 months, which they didn't normally do. And I was like, it's more than I asked for. I appreciate it. And really didn't think that much more about it. Buddy of mine got promoted. So I was going to stay in detectives. Everything was cool. Monday, I walked in the door. Chief brought me back to the office again. So I was trying to figure out what I'd done this time and or said. And he was like, well, so-and-so got demoted over the weekend. I'm like, he got promoted Friday. What happened? It was something old, and it was really silly. It was another whole story. But he had gotten demoted over the weekend, so he says, you might want to go home and get some sleep because you're the shift commander now.
Oh, wow.
So, and by the way, that guy's working for you. And I was like, no. I don't know anything about management, but no. And he was like, no, he requested it. So I was like, okay.
Oh, wow.
So
he requested it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So literally, my first time ever supervising, anyone was midnight shift patrol supervisor.
Wow.
So it was trial by fire. And then it came back. I stayed out there about a year. I said, and when I came back in, I was supervising all my buddies. And that took a lot because now we were buddies, but I had a job to do. So I really, I really had to learn just on the fly. So now I'm way more laid back. You have to have the authoritative side of it because it's paramilitary, right? You can't just let people do whatever they want and sit around in a circle and decide what they're going to do. And especially on, crisis type stuff, you don't have time to do it. Just, you need to do what you need to do. But I always called it, and I called it then when I was running the detective division back then, I always jokingly called it a semi-democracy. Yeah. So the rule was that they could sit around and come up with what they needed to do or wanted to do and vote on it, and that was great, and then bring it to me, and if I liked it, we could do it. So it was a semi-democracy. So now I do much more coaching because I'm not actually doing the day-to-day hands-on stuff. So I look at it more as mentoring now. I am the final word, but I don't walk in. My thought process is I'm not the expert in the room, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And if I think I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room because I'm not, right? And I've got people that work for me that are much more experienced on day-to-day stuff, processing with this chemical and doing that. I can give you the investigation stuff, and I can certainly do the management side of it. So it's much more collaborative now. And, like I said, eventually I'm the final word, but I generally, if there's intelligent input, I'm going to let them do what they need to do and kind of want to do within, as long as it's not going to get me. One of the big rules, two of them for working for Craig. Number one, I've told everybody this for years now. Number one is don't ever lie to me. When you lie to me, I've lost trust in you. I don't need you anymore because now I can't trust you to do anything. So we'll work through it. Whatever you got, 99% of the time, we'll figure it out. So it may be painful for a minute, but we'll figure it out. And then rule number two is, and I don't know why this is so hard to follow, but is don't get Craig in trouble. So, I mean, pretty easy rule, right?
Yeah,
but
you would think.
That's the one that gets them. So, yeah.
Well, I like how you describe that, though, that your style is semi-democracy. I like that. Vote on it. Bring it to me. If I like it, we'll continue doing it. Beautiful way of doing it. In fact, I'm going to probably steal that as my form now.
Sounds good. We'll trademark it.
So what comes to mind when Craig Legates thinks of spiritual resiliency?
That's a tough question. It's a complicated answer.
Well, that's why we're here. Right?
It's a complicated answer. Yeah. I was some background. I was raised. My father was. I was raised till I was 13 in a small town in Delaware, right on the beaches. And my dad was first deacon in the church, and we went to Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening prayer meeting, Thursday visitation, Saturday we cleaned the church, and I went to school at the church. So I lived at the church, and our world, my parents and our world, was wrapped up in that church, and it was great. I mean, it was a good childhood. They did a lot with the older youth, so I got to be basically the mascot for the older kids, and I thought I was cool.
Kind of sounds like Stanley.
Yeah,
actually,
it's Stanley. That's exactly right. So that was, my world was wrapped up in that when I was young, and then the church split, and it was nasty. And even as a kid, 11, 12 years old, I guess I was at the time, like I didn't understand it. People that were my friends one day weren't my friends today, and people that had been around all our lives weren't talking to each other, and it was awful. And unfortunately, that completely skewed my views on organized religion. I was born again. I've been baptized. I never lost my faith. Never lost my faith. It wasn't that, but the organized religion side of it, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with, because why would I? And honestly, that goes back into the resiliency stuff, because now that I'm finally figuring out some of the stuff going on in my brain, some of that goes back to that, because basically the whole world's turned upside down. As a child, you don't understand it. You're in your formative years. Now, I don't trust people, right? Mm-hmm. Well, some of that goes back to, these are my friends. Now they're not my friends, and we're not allowed to talk to them, and they won't talk to us. And so there was a lot of trust issues.
Was this a thing that that all of a sudden, like one day you go, these people are my friend, or is it something that you were being told by your parents?
Yeah, it was more that. It had gotten, because they, of course, sheltered me as much as they possibly could, but it was like literally our life was the church and people in the church, and like they weren't around anymore, and they wouldn't speak to us and stuff like that. Wow. So nobody was actually rude to me. My dad actually split off and started his own church, which is, if you met my dad, that's pretty impressive. He's very quiet, very introverted. So the fact that he stepped up and did that was pretty impressive. So, and I've always admired him for that. So anyway, growing up, didn't want anything to do with organized religion. Like I said, still spiritual, still had faith, still prayed. But didn't want anything to do with any kind of organized religion, and certainly wasn't digging into the spiritual stuff I needed to be digging into, right? And that lasted most of my adult life. It wasn't until, five or so years ago that my wife and I were visiting churches, because I would go to church, but it wasn't something I was really wanting to do, because I didn't want to be involved. Because why would I want to get hurt again, right? And so we went and visited. One of the churches we visited was Journey Church, where we both go now. And it was just something different about it. And I felt comfortable and was able to ease myself back into and let myself feel free enough to begin to actually be doing the stuff, be studying the Bible, be doing the things I needed to do, and becoming involved in the community there, right? And because there was just no trust with religion, so that's built over the time now.
So what was it about that community of Journey Church? What was it about Journey that drew you to that?
Like I said, I was raised in a small town Baptist church, and there's there's churches, and I'm not cracking on any other church, but most of the times they're, who you people, where you from? I don't care, right? And I've been living here long enough. I've been here for 30 something, well, longer than that now, but it was all about who you were, and then what you were wearing, and this, and there's nothing wrong with that. That works for some people, great. That's awesome. But when I walked into church, it was relaxed. People were friendly. I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not going to run around and meet everybody the first day. That's what my wife's for. That's her job.
And she is really
very good at it.
Oh, yes. Right? Yeah, she has never met an enemy. She has never met somebody that she didn't like.
Yeah, no. She which is good.
Yeah.
It's the yin and yang, right? She takes care of that for me, so I can sit back and just watch people. But it was relaxed. And the thing I noticed that impressed me the most as we were going was that, to me, religion, most people, to me, were hypocrites, right? I'm a sinner. I know it. I know I do bad stuff, right? I had been doing really bad stuff, right? But we got there and they were open, like, hey, it was not the old, long time between Saturday night and Sunday morning thing, right? So people were honest about it and talked about it, and that was a way to learn about and to better yourself was through other people. You were the same. One of the things that the old pastor said that to this day sits with me is he was talking about how the churches, most churches are seen as, a bunch of pious Christians, and realistically, the church is nothing but full of sinners, and that's true. But they're sinners that have hope, right? So that really stuck with me. So that's completely changed that, and that spirituality and walk with God is really, like I said, I've been making some changes before. I'm dealing with some demons and that kind of thing. But it really God put me in the place I needed to be.
Yeah.
And around the people I needed to be around.
So it sounds like you've gone through some stuff that your philosophy, your idea of what spiritual resiliency looked like has really evolved and navigate through some stuff that you've gone through. So why don't you give us a moment, a time when you had to rely on spiritual resiliency, or what made that change for you?
There's one specific moment that is burned in my brain and will be forever, and goes back to some of the stuff I've dealt with. But we actually had this was many years ago. We had 2 police officers killed, and Chief and I were actually in the middle of town doing some kind of event when it happened. So we were there within seconds. And as I was burned into my brain as I walked up and I see one of our guys obviously dead, laying in the middle of the street. But what I saw was the chief kneeling beside him, praying over him. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, and like the world stopped. Like literally, I don't remember anything moving. And then I got protective. It's like nobody's going to disturb this moment because I knew what he was doing. I knew what he needed to do. And that moment really affected me and changed me.
So
like,
prior to this, were you said that you weren't really spiritual back then because of, being hurt in the church and the situation, and then now this moment, had you been back in the church at this point, or?
no, this was years and years before.
Wow.
This was, I guess, in 2001 they were killed.
Mm.
But that moment changed the way I was thinking about it. I still didn't want to do with the organized religion side of it, but it certainly changed how I thought and how I reacted. And it was such an impact, and it was such a little thing. And I don't even know if I've talked to that chief about that. But that little moment, and the chief was not, he was Christian, but he wasn't, it was just something I didn't expect to see, especially with that. And it was my scene. I was going to be the investigator, right? So there was, of course, there's 2 dead cops. There's everybody in the world. The whole world's coming. So I didn't have time to really deal with it. But that moment, everything froze. And it's the weirdest thing. In my head, I can see it, and everything in the world froze while he did it. As soon as he got up, it's just like everything went back to, 100 miles an hour. So that really changed how I thought about it. I had talk a little bit about my journey to go along with the resiliency, but I had 5 or 6 years of my life that were just awful, and it was mostly my doing. I was making bad choices, and just I was off the chain. Still doing my job, still good at it. Didn't affect that. That resulted in a divorce. And, that's one of the things, slightly off topic, that's one of the things that with my counseling stuff now, a lot of my clients are actually spouses of law enforcement.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we put them through it, whether we mean to or not. Just the job puts you through it. And then cops are famous for the worst coping skills in the world. And it's awful. I say, and it's not a joke, but they issue a badge, a gun, and an ex-wife. And that's certainly not true for everybody. But that's one of my passions now, is to build that resiliency within the couples. So
not
that
just focusing
not
on the
just
cops,
focusing on
right?
him, because the spouse is at home worried about them. Plus, they're coming home. They may not want to talk. They're coming home. They're in a bad mood because they just saw something absolutely horrible. I saw something the other day. I will not swear by the research, but it was talking about how the average person sees or is involved in 3 truly traumatic events during their lifetime. But at 20-year law enforcement, it's over 800. So, you're dealing with that, and you're bringing it home. So being able to put that away, and, with my ex-wife, she was wonderful. Wonderful mother of my child. She was good to me. I was never home. I was working, and then I wasn't there, right? Physically or mentally or emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what caused that. But one of the things that brought me out of that was obviously years after that. I met Tammy, my wife, and she showed me that I was worth something. Because I had lost that I was, what was the point? That why would anybody, pay attention to me? Why would, I just wasn't worth anything. Right. And it was really a lot of negative. So I was very self-deprecating. It was all negative. Now I can use the terminology as all negative self-talk, right? Yeah, I'm dumb, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that, I never do anything right, And your brain starts believing that after a while. And I just didn't see hope. And so between her and getting back in the church and being around people that raised me up, right? And then I made the decision at some point that I was going to, I needed to fix this. I started to dawn on me. I just got barely smart enough to figure out, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here. You know, I shouldn't, you know, something's just not right. So, like I said, I was battling some demons, nothing, you know, but I actually went to the counseling center right there at the church. Basically, I didn't know why. I just needed to I still don't really know why I went. You know, obviously I knew somewhere in the back of my mind something, it wasn't right, but I went there and God put the therapist in front of me that he needed to put in front of me. And, you know, she was a godsend. And she was perfect because she let me just ramble and talk. She was firm enough not to put up with my nonsense, right?
Oh, nice.
And when I bucked back, you know, because I was fighting it. Even though I was there, I was still fighting it. And I would have, you know, I fought it. And she was strong enough to challenge me without, you know, doing it the right way. And so through that process, that changed my whole outlook. And one of the, you know, a lot of the stuff we talked about was resiliency and bringing this spirituality, because it was we were able to talk about it in that counseling setting, that bringing that spirituality and bringing that resilience and back to attaching it to God and that kind of thing. One of the things she said to me that I think made the most effect was I was talking about how awful I was and whatever. It was some negative junk. And she said, yeah, but you're made in the image of God. I was like, well, that's a drop the mic moment. I guess I'm done here, right? Yeah. All right, I'm going home now. Don't do that no more. But it's true, right? So building that up, building myself back up, you know, and my wife has been there with me every step of the way and had to put up a lot, especially early on. But stood there with me and made me realize there is hope and there are, you know, I do have a purpose. And it's strange now to me because as I go through and I'm finishing up grad school, like this whole mental health counseling stuff, guess where it came from, right? Mm-hmm. So now I want to pass that on. I want people to understand that there is hope. I want to deal with law enforcement and trauma and that kind of stuff and spouses. So building that resiliency into people now that's what I keep trying to pass on.
So how do you build that? How do you build it? Okay, first off, we're going to look at it from 3 different perspectives. How do you build it in yourself, your family, and then your team?
Right. Yourself is obviously probably the hardest for me anyway. And it goes back to what we were just talking about, right? I had to decide at some point I needed to buck up and address whatever was going on, right? And to start allowing God to work in me because, you know, I'm the man. I'm in charge. I need to control this. I need to know what I'm doing. I need to know 5 years from now what I'm doing exactly on this day, you know. So I'm in charge. I'm doing this. And then, so I guess it got to a point where it was kind of rock bottom and it was like, okay, I need to change. I need something. I didn't know what. I couldn't have told you. But letting go of that control, even on the counseling side of it, right? So now I'm sitting here telling some other person who I really don't know awful, awful, awful stuff that I've seen and been through, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not even why I was there, but come to find out that's why I was there, right? And then allowing God to come in and do his thing. And it's strange to people that know me, my wife especially, is like, because now I'm like, you know, I'm getting to graduate in April. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm doing. And, you know, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, you know what? It's going to work out. Everything so far has just worked out. You know, God's got it. I mean, and for me to say that that's impressive because, so making a conscious decision to allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable and build that resiliency up. Family. My daughter's an adult. She's getting ready to have her first child, so her first grandbaby. And with my wife, we just had to work together, right? And talk about it and be open about it. Be open about our struggles, whether they were together or not. One of the things we really worked on, we're both fixers, right? We see something, we're going to fix it, right? And usually it's not good when one person is. It's really not good when two people are. And we're both very much, we're going to fix this, right?
And you probably have two separate ways of doing it.
And two different ways of doing it, right? And I'll never forget, we were on a walk one day and I was talking about something that was pretty traumatic, and she was fixing it. And I remember saying, please stop. I just need you to hear me. And I don't know where that came from.
Wow.
That all being said, understanding I do the exact same thing or worse, right? So it's not, I'm not putting that on her, right? But so then I had to say to myself, okay, you need to shut up and be there. Just be there, right? So communication is always key within, that kind of relationship. So
it's identifying the moment that you just need somebody to listen to you, to hear you. And with you both being fixers, it was definitely that moment where it was like, okay, I just need you to hear me.
Yeah, just hear me. Just listen. And I did the exact same thing to her. Or worse. So it was that moment. Work is trying to be the example, right? And not necessarily I'm the perfect Christian, I don't ever do anything wrong, that kind of stuff. But being the good person to where they're looking at you going, something's different about him. And a lot of times I can't figure it out, and I get that, right? But that it gives you the opportunity to talk about why. And I'm also much more vulnerable with people at work and my employees now. Before I was, the big bad guy who's been there and done it all, right? And just, that's the way it is. But now I'm open about my struggles, right? And we were actually having a conversation with a couple of the people that work for me last week, and they were talking about this major incident I talked about earlier, and they were like, we've all got our weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, I'm going to challenge you on that. For you to sit here and say that, is it a weakness? The brain's going to do what the brain's going to do, right? So is it a weakness? Or did it take more strength for you to say that and talk about a struggle or a thought or an image, right? Because we all got them. You can sit over there and say you don't all day long. Okay, it's not true, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The strength it takes to step up and say, hey, let's talk about this, or whatever it is, or process it out however, or, admit that, you're not perfect, because that was my thing throughout most of my life, is I had to be perfect, right? It's obviously unrealistic. So imagine the pressure, right? You have to be perfect at everything. So being able to be vulnerable and pass that on. But like I said, just be different. It's not that I'm doing Bible study when we come in the morning and stuff like that, but it's being different. And the people are just starting to figure out, hey, wait a minute, something's different with him.
And then they start to question
and that's the opportunity, right? And that's the opportunity. So,
and it's not about Bible thumping. It's through those actions that we do that people can see there's something different. Whenever they are having moments of questioning, that you're available and open to them coming to you.
Yeah, and that's really different, especially for me. But I get the mental health person is there to build a rapport so the deputies can go sit in with them. Well, guess where the deputies are coming? To my office, and that's amazing, right? And if they're not coming to me, I'm catching them in the parking lot, and just having a talk. Not even talking about anything. We're not talking about mental health, or we're not talking about, whatever, but showing them we're all human, I guess, is and just showing them something's different.
And that it's okay.
It's okay. It is okay. And that we had that debrief last week. We had a 2 weeks ago, we had a 3-year-old die. That it was awful. And kids are usually the worst because, they're kids, right? And within the department, I was still getting, oh man, bothering you. You need to find another job. And but the good news was that was the odds out people, right? The other people were starting to it's okay to, you gotta, you get that image in your head, right? It's okay. That's what happens. It's a common reaction to trauma, right? So let's process it out now.
I think we're starting to see a stigma shift in the military as well, again, for the better. We're seeing a lot more individuals, a lot more supervisors exiting that were, quote, the old hats, right? The old heads.
Right.
And we're starting to see a transition of individuals that genuinely care about the people, which is really what that comes from. It doesn't come from an idea of you're weak if you go do this. It's I care about you enough that I want to see success for you outside of this place,
right,
the same as I want to see here. Yeah. Because if you're not successful here, you're not going to be successful there. You're not. It doesn't work that way.
Right. And 5 years ago, I would have said some of the same dumb stuff. Right. Yeah. It's not good, man. It ain't bothering me. Which, okay. Well, now we figured out. Oh, maybe that is bothering me. Not even if not directly, but it amazes me the ones that usually are the ones that are, oh man, you find another job and nothing bothers me. Yeah, but one time, this such happened to me. So, they want to talk to it too. And a lot of that's going away. And there are several people within the department that are, I call them heavy hitters. They're the ones people are looking up to, right? They're not necessarily the rank. They're the workers that people that everybody's kind of looking up to. And like this debrief the other day, I keep using as an example. Several of them are there. These are the cool people, the one everybody wants to be like. And I was like, I thanked even every one of them for being there because they're showing their people. It's okay. You don't have to be rock hard we have to do our job, and while we're doing our job, we have to be able to compartmentalize it and put it away, right? I can't go out on a scene and have a breakdown, right? Because I'm not doing my job. But at some point I need to process it. And that's where we're
processing.
And that's what doesn't happen because it sits, right? And even with me, I couldn't have told you I had any issues with anything. Like there was not one thing I was like, oh my gosh, I have But there are behaviors that come with it, right? There are thoughts, there are attitudes, there are moods, right? And it comes out. So anger, whatever they are, anger, anxiety, bad choices, right? Alcohol and drugs that's a coping mechanism, right? Law enforcement, it's usually alcohol. It's legal, right? And that's self-medicating for the most part. And so that stuff's actually starting to be talked about. So that's how we're kind of building that back in now. So it's a struggle, but we're talking about it.
It's really nice to see that transition. But Craig, what I want you to think about, now you're getting your master's degree, you're getting the knowledge. Let's look fast forward 6 months from now, or a year and 6 months from now. What are you going to be doing? How are you going to transition?
Right now, and things are not in stone, so it looks like I'm going to basically start my own practice. And with that, I can, depending on how I want to take it, I can see my own clients, or I can contract with certain places, right? So I don't necessarily have to work for this company or this counseling center. I can contract with them. So technically I'm attached to them, but I can control what I need to control, right? I love working with the church because one of the advantages of working there is, if someone needs biblical counseling, We have pastors for that, right? I'm not a biblical counselor. I'm not a theologian, right? But being at that church, I'm allowed to talk about God. I'm not going to push it, and I'm not going to try to change anybody, because that's not my position there, right? But if we want to go there, I can go there, and we can talk about that and talk about spiritual resiliency on top of just regular, stuff. So that's the advantage there. But anyway, so I would like to stay working with first responders. I like, this is going to sound awful, I like the trauma. I don't like the trauma, obviously, but I like working with the trauma, right? And if you're going to work with first responders, that's what you're doing. So I've actually been through a couple different specialty therapies. So I've been trained in prolonged exposure therapy, and I've been trained in EMDR, which is another trauma therapy. So I'm angling that way. And I've got, there are some talks with people about being able to function within that world, right? And there's some opportunities coming that is bringing mental health into the law enforcement circle. They took 25, 30 years ago, they took all the money away from mental health, right? So that's why law enforcement's dealing with mental health now, or it's starting to change back. So law enforcement is not trained to deal with mental health, right? So bad things happen, right? And then we've got, what's the only thing we can do with them is put them in jail, right? So, and they need to go. I mean, if they've done something, we're not just putting people in jail. Obviously, but if they committed a crime, but is sitting in there doing them any good, or is it making it worse? I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished necessarily, but why can't we be treating mental health issues while we're at it, right? So then when they come out, they're better off than when they went in, right? Not worse off. So that kind of stuff's really starting to kick up, and the funding's starting to come down for mental health related stuff within law enforcement. So that's going to be changing a lot over the next few years.
That's a good aspect to be able to look at it too. I mean, Craig, you've given almost 30 years of service to the communities, right? I mean, alone within the Dorchester County, South Carolina, you've done 14 years, and by the time you retire, transition out, it'll be at 16. Right. So, I mean, you have that connection because, number one, you've been there, and number two, you've done that. And I think that you have seen, and even me, I've known you for a couple of years now, and I've had the pleasure of being able to talk to you every single Sunday, just to get to know you. And you can see even the transition that you've made at the church, right? In that environment,
right?
You're a lot more open to who you are as an individual. And now that you've been doing the master's degree stuff, you've also been able to see that you're listening a lot more to the people that are around, and being able to help and identify, hey, that could go south very, very quickly. Right. And that's amazing to be able to see. Something I'm also really interested in is your tattoo, because
Which one?
Touche. Okay. In looking at the one on your left arm up towards the top, really, really descriptive on it. It looks like it's a demon that's being stomped out by an angel. Is that?
Yep. St. Michael.
Fair? So, by St. Michael, that's actually for law enforcement, correct?
Yep. Archangel, but he's a patron saint of law enforcement. So.
And what does that demon to you on your arm, what does that represent?
Well, it's kind of ironic. The young lady that does my tattoos, I told her I want a St. Michael, and there's a kind of a normal picture of the St. Michael's tattoo, which is not nearly as graphic as this. And when I got there, she has permission to do whatever she wants because she's brilliant, right? And
artistic.
We did. Oh my goodness, she's amazing. And so she put the stencil on. I wasn't paying attention because she's her. So we made it halfway to the chair, and she goes, "By the way, I didn't like that picture. I've done that before, so I'm doing my own." I was like, "Okay, I don't know what this is going to come out like." Then I look, and I'm like, "Why are we putting demons on my arm?" But the ironic thing is, there were two, and I've talked about my struggles, and there were two main issues, which kind of all other stuff kind of umbrellaed under, right? So the ironic thing is there are two demons in this tattoo, and one of them's already been destroyed, and the other one's about to, right? And so I had no idea that wasn't on purpose, right? but it's kind of ironic. So, you know,
stomping out, one is already gone and one is still continuing. And I think that may represent those everyday sins that we have, or those everyday things that we continue to do by human nature, right?
Absolutely.
So, Craig, it is absolutely been awesome sitting here talking to you. Actually, one final question. What are you reading right now, or what is your book recommendation?
I haven't read a book that's not a textbook in over 3 years, so that's going to be very difficult. My normal stuff is, I read a lot of leadership and all that stuff when I was younger, and I've been through all the executive management stuff. And really, honestly, I'll tell you, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is I'm a huge history buff. I want to go back to reading about my history stuff, right? So the last thing I want to look at right now is a book. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm over it. My wife mentioned the word PhD the other day, and I threw her out of the house. So no, I'm just kidding. But
why don't you go back to Amazon?
No.
Go buy something.
Yeah, go buy something on Amazon. That's right. No, seriously. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back to actually like reading what I want and that kind of stuff. So
well, here's what I want you to do. In between now and the date that we publish this, come up with a book that you would recommend that you want to read. And what we'll do is we'll provide a link to it in the description so that other people can join you on that journey as well.
I actually thought of one that they used to have an auxiliary with local police department here with the spouses. And one of the things that we kind of researched and started, actually, this was years and years and years ago, but it's always stuck with me. And I actually have copies of it that I give to some of my clients. And it's called I Love a Cop. And I can't remember the author. I'll look it up. But it's called I Love a Cop. And it's basically not a how-to, but it's a, hey, here's what to expect. Here's things that can happen. Here's things why they're happening, right? And it gives you a better view, because if you're not around that person and they all of a sudden get into law enforcement, your life's changing as well as theirs, right? Their whole attitude is going to change, not necessarily for the worse, but, the hours are awful. You're getting beat down every day. You come home, you turn the news on, you're getting beat down. You open social media, you're getting beat down. You're never going to do anything right. You might as well get used to it. And that wears on you, right? And it wears on the spouses too, because they're sitting there having to read that stuff too and listen to that stuff too and listen. Besides the fact that, hey, is he coming home tonight? Right? I had one of my clients now that her fiance is in law enforcement, been in law enforcement a long time. She said the greatest sound in the world is Velcro. And I was like, I knew what she meant, but the Velcro when his vest is coming off. He's home and his vest is coming off. And she said, that's the sweetest sound in the world, right? So you're putting them through it. So that's one book that I found has really, really kind of helped the spouses out, right? And it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever. It's just kind of, here's why some things are happening. Here's some things that could happen. Here's why.
Man, right? That resonates a lot. Yeah. The sound of Velcro.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So I Love a Cop. We will provide a link in the descriptions tonight. Thank you, Craig, so much for coming and doing this. I know that it's really tough sometimes to talk about what you do, but I can tell that you absolutely have a passion for people. You have a passion for the mental health industry, that you have a passion for cops and their spouses, not just because you've been one for almost 30 years, but because of what you are doing as you transition out of that lifestyle. So thank you so much for being here. Today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer G. Frazier with 369sounddesign.com. That's 369sounddesign.com. He is truly the one that has the hardest job of here because he makes me sound good. So I am so blessed to have him. We are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next time.